The night Meng Tingzhou's childhood sweetheart Qingmai returned to the capital, he gave me two choices. First, to be his secondary wife of equal status. Second, to divorce him amicably. I chose the latter, but as I sat down to write the divorce papers, I found out I was pregnant, so I said nothing. Instead, I slipped him a dose of irreversible infertility medicine. The next day, I packed my bags and returned to Lingzhou, disappearing without a trace ever since. 10 years later, Meng Tingzhou, now the Marquis of Yongning, was plagued by endless gossip and troubles, all because he had no heir after all these years. That was when I arrived in the capital, bringing with me a child who bore an uncanny resemblance to him in eyebrows and eyes. I rented a small shop in the West Market of the capital. It was the 10th year since our divorce, and I was back in the imperial city once more. The reason I came was that Zhong's tutor had come to me, saying he had never met such a gifted student in his life. At the tender age of 9, the boy could compose poems and write political essays that cut straight to the heart of the current issues, every word a gem of wisdom. The tutor said the child had a future as bright as the stars, and if at all possible, I should take him to the capital to find better teachers, lest this rare talent be wasted. I replied, very well. I went back home, counted my savings, converted all my assets into silver, made simple preparations, then hired a carriage and traveled 1,000 miles to the capital. Upon arrival, I rented a small courtyard in the west of the city and leased a shop, planning to run a small business there for a living. Everything was done in little over a month, swift and efficient. Because I had always known this day would come sooner or later, on our way back from enrolling Zhong in the academy, I rested my chin on my hand, lost in thought. Zhong lifted the corner of the carriage curtain, gazing out with curious eyes. We were on Zhuqiu Avenue, the bustling heart of the capital, where powerful nobles gathered in droves. Fine horses pulled ornate carriages past us. Young lords and noble ladies were dressed in luxurious silks, and even the servants following them were neatly attired and well-groomed. I spoke suddenly. Zhong, do you like it here? He nodded vigorously. I love it. We had lived in Lingzhou before, a land of fish and rice, abundant and prosperous, but it was far from being as wealthy and magnificent as the imperial capital. The carriage rumbled past the Marquis of Yongning's mansion, its beams carved with intricate patterns and painted in vibrant colors, exuding an air of grandeur and splendor. I pointed at it. What if Mother makes you the master of this mansion one day? Would you like that? He turned to look at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. How could that ever be possible? Mother always keeps her promises. Though Zhong still looked confused, he saw the absolute certainty and earnestness in my eyes, so he nodded in agreement. Okay. I curved my lips into a smile. After all, he was the son of Meng Tingzhou, the Marquis of Yongning, his only son, too. 12 years ago, I married Meng Tingzhou as his lawful wife. He was the third son of the Marquis of Yongning. His two elder brothers were both accomplished men. One was a brilliant scholar serving in the imperial court. The other was the commander of the imperial secret police, a loyal hound of the emperor. By all rights, the title of Marquis should never have fallen to him. He should have lived his life as a carefree, idle noble. But for me, this marriage was the highest of high. My parents had passed away when I was young, leaving me weak and without anyone to rely on. So I had come to the capital to seek refuge with my cousin aunt, who was married to the Minister of Rights. Meng Tingzhou was on close terms with my cousin, and often visited the minister's mansion. As time went by, he and I became well acquainted. We both loved playing the qin, and would often practice together in the bamboo grove. Seasons came and went, flowers bloomed and faded, and gradually, affection grew between us. One day, after we finished playing a piece, I suddenly bid him farewell. I'm sorry, young Master Meng. I handed him a qin score I had cherished for many years. Today may be the last time we meet. Please keep this as a memento. He looked utterly astonished. Why? Because I am going to marry someone else. Though my family background was humble, I was exceptionally beautiful. Ever since I had reached the age of 15, many matchmakers had come to propose marriage on my behalf. Just a few days prior, a matchmaker had brought a name card from the second son of the Minister of Rights, asking for a formal meeting between us. My cousin aunt had said it was a rare opportunity, a family of good standing, a young man of decent character and appearance, who was even willing to take me as his main wife. But before I could reply, Meng Tingju spoke up. I will marry you. What? I thought I must have misheard him. I said, Jiang Zhiyue, I have fallen for you. I want to marry you. The Marquis of Yongning's mansion was not a family just anyone could marry into, especially not a penniless cousin like me. My cousin aunt was overjoyed. She immediately declined the matchmaker's proposal and set about arranging my wedding. The days after I married into the Marquis's mansion were peaceful and happy. My parents-in-law were kind and easy to get along with. My sisters-in-law and I lived in harmony. We were deeply in love, a perfect couple playing the qin and set together in harmony. But this idyllic happiness did not last long. In the second year of our marriage, Li Xina came back. The Li and Meng families had been close friends for generations. Li Xina and Meng Tingju had grown up together as childhood sweethearts. When she was 12 years old, her father had angered the emperor and been demoted, forcing the entire family to move to Linen. Over the years, they had lost all contact with the Mengs. Now, the emperor had remembered his old friend and restored the Li family's official position. One day, Meng Tingju returned home from his official duties and ran into Li Xina on the main street. She had shot him a glance filled with resentment and longing, hesitated as if she had something to say, then walked away quickly. That single glance was enough to make him lose his appetite and toss and turn sleeplessly for days on end. I want to take Li Xina as my secondary wife of equal status. Meng Tingju said these words while I was embroidering a sachet for him. My hands froze mid-stitch, the needle pricked my finger, and blood seeped out, staining the silk. I looked at the man in front of me, feeling nothing but complete and utter strangeness. Just a few days ago, he had still been showering me with love and affection. That day, he had gone to a banquet and seen that all his colleagues had sachets embroidered by their wives, all except him. When he returned home, he had pestered me to make one for him, but I only knew how to play the qin. I was not good at embroidery at all. After being pestered by him half the night, I was too exhausted to refuse any longer, so I had promised him I would try. How could he have changed his mind so drastically in just a few days? He did not notice my shock and continued talking, lost in his own thoughts. I never thought that after all these years, Xina still remembers the feelings we shared when we were young. She hasn't married anyone to this day. When I saw her, I felt so guilty, so I must make it up to her. Li Xina had moved away with her father when she was 12. I had come to live with my cousin aunt when I was 13 and met Meng Tingju then. I knew nothing about their past, so why did I have to be the one to suffer the wrong, just to make up for her? Meng Tingju took my hand, trying to soothe me. It's all right, Zhiyue. She will only be my secondary wife of equal status. She has a straightforward personality, she speaks her mind, but she is not a bad person. Once she enters the mansion, I'm sure you two will get along well. I did not need to wait for the future to find out. I had already gotten a taste of Li Xina's true colors. One day, I went to a jewelry shop and ran into her there. She looked at me with a haughty expression, her chin tilted up as she pointed at me. I recognize you. Are you the one who seduced my third brother? I was forced to take a step back. I did not seduce him. Ha, who would believe that? She let out a sneering laugh, her tone aggressive and sharp. With your lowly, destitute background, if you hadn't used some cheap, seductive tricks, how could you have possibly climbed into a noble family like the Mengs? Do you even know how to write the words integrity and shame? My train of thought snapped back to the present. Meng Tingju was still talking, rambling on about his vision of the future. Jiyue, you can rest assured even after Shina enters the mansion, my love for you will not diminish in the slightest. I cut him off, asking coldly, what if I refuse? Refuse? He frowned, his voice sharp with reproach. Can't you be a little more sensible? Can't you think of me for once? Now that Master Li has been restored to his official position, Shina's social status is higher than yours. Are you really going to make her suffer the humiliation of being a concubine? If you refuse to accept this arrangement, then the only other option is a divorce. I'd like to see where you can go without me. With that, he turned on his heel and strode away. I turned my back to him, closing my eyes tiredly. Very well, then let us divorce. 3. The small study was cold and quiet. I spread out a sheet of paper, ground the ink stick, and began to write the divorce papers. Perhaps I was overcome with grief, or perhaps it was something else entirely. The dinner that had been sent to me sat untouched on the side table. I had no appetite at all. The greasy smell of the food filled my nostrils, and I felt a sudden wave of nausea, retching violently. Xiao Tang, my loyal maid who was also skilled in medicine, seemed to sense something was wrong. She grabbed my wrist and felt my pulse. As expected, her voice trembled as she spoke. Madam, you are with child. She was overjoyed. Your position in the Marquis's mansion is secure now. My heart skipped a beat. Poor child. Why did you have to come now, of all times? Even if I stayed, what kind of life would we have? Not only would I have to endure your father, the scoundrel who could never be faithful to one woman, but I would also have to deal with Li Shina, who was far from being an easy opponent. Her family background and her history with your father both overshadowed mine. What kind of future would we have? Xiao Tang was so happy she burst into tears. She made a move to run outside. This servant will go tell the Marquis and the old madam at once. They will stand up for you. But I shouted at her to stop. Stand right there. Do not take another step. This is a secret between you and me. Not a word of this to anyone else. I sat in silence all night, listening to the patter of rain against the window panes. If I divorced him and quietly got rid of this child, Meng Tingju would never know the truth, let alone feel any guilt, in the end. Only I would be left hurt and broken. I could not let it end like this. I could not swallow this humiliation without getting my revenge. The rain continued to fall softly, and a plan slowly began to take shape in my mind. The next day, Meng Tingju walked into the small study. I heard from the servants that you've thought it over. I have. He had assumed that, with my parents dead and no one to rely on, I would never bear to leave the security of the Marquis's mansion. Good. I knew you were the most reasonable person, Jiyue. His words trailed off mid-sentence. He stared in shock as I handed him a letter of divorce, along with 2 cups of tea, my expression calm and composed. Drink this cup of tea, and our marriage will be over. All the love and affection between us will be severed forever. Rest assured, after the divorce, I will return to Lingju. My ancestors left behind some modest property there, which will be more than enough to support me. I will never set foot in the capital again to be an eyesore to you and her. Why are you being so stubborn? Meng Tingju looked confused and frustrated. Shina has already agreed to the arrangement. If you would just apologize and promise to get along with her peacefully, you can still remain my wife. But I did not waver for a single moment. I lifted my cup and drained the tea in one go. I heard you have a divided heart, so I have come to sever our ties completely. Then I pushed the other cup toward him. The story of your reunion with your childhood sweetheart Li Shina has already spread throughout the capital. The common people are all praising you, Meng Tingju, as a man of great loyalty and righteousness, a true gentleman. But now, you're hesitating and dragging your feet. This is not the behavior of a gentleman. So, please, drink up. Very well indeed. He was filled with resentment, his hands clenched into tight fists. After a moment of hesitation, All he could manage to say were bitter words spoken out of spite. Jiang Jiue, you have grown accustomed to the luxurious life in the capital. Do not come crying to me when you regret this decision later. With that, he lifted the cup and drank the tea in one gulp. Little did he know, I had already slipped a generous dose of colorless, tasteless, irreversible infertility medicine into his tea. For years, I had lived in the capital as a dependent, swallowing my pride and enduring endless grievances, but before I left, I had finally done something truly great, even if it was done in secret. With my head hung low in shame, I opened a Qin studio, making a living by teaching people how to play the 7-string zither. Thanks to my superb skills, I soon gained a small reputation in the neighborhood. All my students knew I owned a jade-framed Qin. It was a family heirloom passed down from my ancestors, the only one of its kind in the world. They said its strings produced clear, melodious notes that sounded like music from heaven itself. I cherished it dearly, polishing it every single day, yet I had never played it in front of anyone. When people asked why, I would only shake my head. Once upon a time, I played *Phoenix seeking the Phoenix* on this Qin in a forest, and fell in love with a young man over that one tune. Sadly, we later broke off all ties. The day I left, I swore I would never play this Qin again for the rest of my life. The story spread far and wide, and many people flocked to the Qin studio to see the commotion. But I wore a veil hat every day, never showing my face. The more mysterious I was, the more people were eager to uncover the truth. Some even compiled a list of all the renowned Qin players in the capital, setting up bets on who the mysterious Qin teacher could be. Meng Tingju was among the names on that list. Speaking of him, he had become quite the famous figure in the capital recently, with everyone talking about him. Over the past 10 years, the eldest young master of the Meng family had been gravely ill, and the second young master had been struck by a poisoned arrow while arresting a criminal and passed away. Thus, the family title had unexpectedly fallen to him, the third young master. Unfortunately, it seemed the Meng family's ancestral graves had been cursed. This third young master also suffered from some hidden ailment. He had married 2 wives in succession, yet had not fathered a single heir. Old Madame Meng planned to let him adopt a child from either the eldest or second branch to carry on his lineage. He was utterly desperate, consumed by anxiety. The common folks would chat about it over tea and melon seeds, relishing the gossip. Adopting a child is no match for having one of your own blood, is it? Exactly. A man who can't have children is no different from a duck that can't lay eggs. He'll toil away his whole life, only to end up working for someone else. Early in the 6th lunar month, the imperial examination results were announced, and the capital was bustling with excitement. Rumors had it that Jingyan Temple was extremely efficacious for praying for academic success. Every year, many successful candidates would climb the mountain to fulfill their vows, hoping to share in that good fortune. I decided to visit the temple as well. Inside the main hall, I held incense sticks in reverence, bowing devoutly before the divine statues. First, I prayed that Zhonga would have a bright future ahead of him. Second, I prayed that my long-cherished wish would be fulfilled. Never did I expect the gods to answer my prayers so quickly. As I left the temple and reached the halfway point down the mountain, the carriage ahead of me suddenly came to a halt. Inside the carriage, an elaborately dressed old lady had fainted on the spot, unconscious. Several maids scrambled to lift her out, while 2 young ladies accompanying her burst into tears in panic. It turned out she had suffered a heart attack from the exhaustion and jolting of the journey. But this was a desolate mountain path halfway up the hill. There was no way to find a doctor anywhere nearby. A human life was at stake. I grabbed Xiaotang's hand and hurried forward. Don't panic, my maid knows some medical skills. She'll be all right. The group quickly made way for us. Xiaotang always carried silver needles and emergency medicine with her. She moved swiftly, feeling the old lady's pulse, applying the needles, feeding her medicine, and then giving detailed instructions on how to care for her. Before long, the old lady took a long, relieved breath and slowly regained consciousness. "Grandmother," the little lady threw herself into her arms. "It was these two kind ladies who saved you." The other noble lady bowed to us. "May I ask the names and residences of our two benefactors? My father will pay a personal visit to express his gratitude another day." I recognized this old lady. She was the wife of Marquis Yunyang, who had been on close terms with Meng Tingzhou's mother for years. She used to visit their mansion frequently, so she had certainly seen both of us before. Worried about being recognized, I pulled my veil hat tighter, covering my face completely. "You are too kind, your ladyship. We just happened to pass by and lent a helping hand. It was merely a trivial matter, not worth mentioning." I bowed to take my leave. "I have a young son waiting for me at home. I really cannot linger here any longer. So I must take my leave now." Marquis Yunyang's wife watched as our carriage gradually faded into the distance. She murmured to herself, "Why do I feel like that maid by her side looks familiar? As if I've seen her somewhere before." Her memory felt fuzzy, and she couldn't quite place where. Who exactly is she? After returning from Jingyan Temple, the speculation about me grew more intense by the day, spreading from the west of the capital to the east, and eventually throughout the entire city. I figured that if these rumors could spread all over the capital, they would surely reach Li Shin's ears as well. To be on the safe side, I no longer sent Zhonga to school. Instead, I hired a private tutor for him and kept him by my side at all times. One night, after seeing off my last batch of students and tidying up the Qin studio, I was ready to head home. Suddenly, a group of people burst through the door. A woman led the charge, her voice shrill with anger as she pointed at me. "How dare you call yourself a Qin teacher? You're nothing but a fraud. My child was humiliated in public because of you, laughed at by everyone. If you don't give me a proper explanation today, I'll tear this studio down to the ground. Do not spout such slanderous lies." I raised my voice, indignant. "Everyone here, my neighbors, my students, can vouch for my Qin skills. If you truly have a clear conscience, then come with me to the government office. The truth will speak for itself there." She was strong, grabbing me by the arm and trying to drag me outside forcefully. "Mother, mother!" Zhonga tried to protect me, lunging forward to bite her hand, but several burly men behind her grabbed him by the arms and easily threw him to the ground. In the chaos of the struggle, my veil hat fell off. The moment she caught sight of my face, her eyes widened with certainty. She shouted at the top of her lungs to her accomplices, "What are you all waiting for? Break this place apart." Then she turned to the crowd of onlookers, yelling maliciously, "Do you think a widow and her son could have settled in the capital so easily? She must have slept with countless men behind closed doors. Isn't that right?" The air was filled with the sounds of shouting, smashing, crying, and the murmurs of the crowd. A chaotic cacophony. In the blink of an eye, a figure darted through the crowd, leaping in front of me in a flash. The troublemaking woman was kicked to the ground with a single blow. "How dare you?" he roared in anger, his voice thunderous. "I, the Marquis, am here. Who dares to act recklessly?" Meng Tingzhou. He had heard the recent rumors, but had never been certain until today, when that woman had torn off my veil hat and revealed my face. Only then did he finally confirm his suspicions. The troublemakers were dragged off to the government office, and the crowd of onlookers was dispersed. The commotion gradually died down, leaving only the three of us standing there. After all these years apart, seeing each other again felt strange and unfamiliar. He rubbed his hands nervously, his tone awkward and stiff as he spoke up. "Jiue, were you frightened just now?" I didn't answer, stepping past him directly and taking our son's hand. "Zhonga, let's go home." The Qin studio was only 2 streets away from our residence. It would take just a quarter of an hour to walk there. Meng Tingju followed silently behind us, maintaining a distance that was neither too far nor too close. Just as I was about to close the courtyard gate, he finally could not contain himself any longer. He stepped forward, blocking my way. Jiang Zhiyue, I helped you out of a tight spot today. Won't you invite me in for a cup of tea? I slightly turned sideways, making way for him. You are a high-ranking marquis, your lordship. How dare this humble woman refuse? The room was simple and plain, with sparse furnishings. Meng Tingju, dressed in his luxurious finery, looked completely out of place here. Xiaotang went to light the fire and boil water, while I fetched a tea cake from the cabinet. I only have loose tea leaves at home. They taste a bit bitter and astringent. I hope you will not mind, your lordship. He glanced around the room. Then his eyes fell on me as I skillfully cleaned the tea set. There was a tinge of emotion in his voice. Once upon a time, your hands were only used for writing poems, painting landscapes, playing the qin, and arranging flowers. Now you have to do all these menial chores. Have you and our son been living like this all these years? They say it is hard to go from luxury to frugality, but it becomes easy as long as you let go of your pride and accept your circumstances with an open heart. Earning one's own living is nothing to be ashamed of, I replied in a calm, even tone. In Lingju, our life was a little better than this. But later, Zhong's school teacher said he was exceptionally gifted and hoped I would find him better tutors. That is why I brought him back here. I thought life in the capital would be difficult, and we would have many expenses in the future, so we had to cut back on our living costs a little. On the table lay a few books, with a name written on the top one, **** Meng Ruzhang ****. He knelt down halfway, bringing his eyes level with Zhong's, staring at the pair of eyes that bore an 8-part resemblance to his own. He fell silent for a long time. Then, his voice filled with disbelief, he asked, "Mine?" I had imagined this exact scene countless times in my mind. Back then, he had not truly wanted to divorce me and sever all ties. On the contrary, because I had left him so abruptly, he had even harbored some lingering feelings for me. Therefore, for me, playing the emotional card, pretending to be weak and pitiful, and using retreat as a form of advance was the simplest and safest strategy. The power and wealth of the Marquis's mansion were too tempting to achieve my goal. What harm was there in swallowing my pride and feigning compliance for the time being? I found him. I deliberately turned around, avoiding his gaze. My voice was stubborn and defiant. In any case, this child has nothing to do with you. You and I have long since settled all our grievances and debts. Nothing about me has anything to do with you anymore. What happened at the Qin studio just now was none of your business, but you insisted on meddling. The moment he heard the words "settled all our grievances and debts," he instantly lost his composure. He stood up abruptly, his tone urgent and agitated. "Jiang Zhiyue, do you think I would believe such a lie? You divorced me, yet secretly gave birth to our child. Is this what you call settling all our grievances and debts? Why didn't you tell me you were raising this child alone all these years? Why didn't you tell me you were being bullied and ostracized in the capital? You knew perfectly well that I would never turn a blind eye to your troubles if you had just asked for my help. That's enough. Meng Tingju, shut up." I lost control of my emotions, tears streaming down my face as I shouted at the top of my lungs. Do you think I really wanted to give up the glory and wealth of the Marquis's mansion, beg for a divorce, and run off to live a life of hardship back then? It was all because I loved you. The words hung in the air like a bolt of lightning, and the expression on Meng Tingzhou's face froze instantly. It was the first time in my life that I realized I was such an excellent actress. I bit my lip hard, secretly pinching my thigh fiercely to keep the tears flowing, and pressed on. I couldn't bear to share your husband with other women. I couldn't tolerate your love being divided between me and someone else. How I wished I could pretend to be magnanimous and kind, free from jealousy and resentment. so that I could stay by your side forever. But I couldn't do it. You would love another woman just as you loved me, write her the same love poems. Take her to admire the same cherry blossoms in spring, play the cheen and sing together in perfect harmony, lingering in each other's arms in tender affection. Just the thought of that scene drove me almost insane. What else could I have done? What else did you expect me to do, besides asking for a divorce? What other choice did I have? Now that you've heard me admit it with my own mouth, are you satisfied, caught up in the heat of the moment? I snatched a teacup from the table and hurled it at him in a fit of vengeful rage. Meng Tingju didn't dodge. He stood rooted to the spot like a stone sculpture. In his eyes right now, my wild outburst was nothing but the pangs of love turned to anger, of affection twisted into resentment. He strode forward and pulled me into his arms. Jiyue, I'm so happy. You still have me in your heart, don't you? You can never forget me, can you? I was tired of acting, tired of shouting myself hoarse. When I spoke, my voice was raw and gravelly. Yes, after we divorced, I found out I was pregnant. What does that tell you? It means you and I are bound by a cursed fate in this life. We can never escape each other. All these years have passed, and I don't hate you anymore. Now, just being able to look at you is enough for me. I ask for nothing more. 7. I closed down the Qin studio. Following Meng Tingzhou's arrangements, I took Zhong'e and moved into another mansion of his. He would go back to make preparations, offering sacrifices to the ancestors, updating the family tree, then take Zhong'e back to the Marquis's mansion to be recognized as his legitimate heir. He vowed to get to the bottom of the people who had been harassing me. Of course I knew who was behind it all, and what her motives were. Li Shina had found out about my return to the capital even before Meng Tingju did. She had tried to harm Zhong'e, only to find that I kept him by my side day and night, leaving her with no chance to strike, so she had resorted to smearing my name, hoping to make me lose all face and be forced to leave the capital for good. But the investigation was abruptly dropped halfway through. Meng Tingju had already found all the witnesses and evidence. He had gone to confront Li Shina, and the two of them had had a bitter falling out, screaming at each other until their faces turned blue. He had called her a venomous woman with a heart of snakes and scorpions. She had hurled back that he was a fickle man who couldn't keep his word. In the middle of their quarrel, Li Shina had suddenly collapsed to the ground. The mansion's physician had felt her pulse and discovered that she was already pregnant. The arrival of 2 children in quick succession had left Meng Tingju so overjoyed that he didn't know what to do with himself. One day, when Meng Tingju came to Shuiyun courtyard, there was a look of unease on his face. I poured him a cup of tea, and his hands trembled twice as he took it, nearly spilling the tea all over himself. He opened his mouth several times, but each time the words died on his lips. I put on a look of understanding and concern. What's wrong, my lord? You seem to have something on your mind. It's about the Marquis's mansion. I originally planned to bring you and Zhong'e back these days, but something unexpected has come up. A flash of guilt crossed his eyes. Shina is pregnant. You know how hot-tempered she is, and now that she's carrying a child, she can't stand any excitement. I'm afraid we'll have to put off your and Zhong'e's return to the mansion for a while longer. We'll wait until she gives birth safely. Then I'll send for you both. Is that all right? I had known it would never be that easy. Before I could say a word, Zhong'e had already stepped forward and tugged at his sleeve, peering up at him with a cautious look. Father, now that you're going to have a little brother or sister, will you stop loving me and mother? Of course not. Meng Tingju picked the child up and held him high in the air. You and your little brother or sister, you are all my flesh and blood, in my heart. You are all equally precious to me. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat, but I forced 2 tears to roll down my cheeks, putting on a look of tender longing and reluctance. All right, as long as you never forget me and Zhong'e, we are willing to wait for you for as long as it takes. He let out a long, relieved breath. Over the past 10 years, he had more than enough experience dealing with Li Shina's tantrums. He had thought that convincing me to wait would take a lot of time and effort, but he had never expected me to be so understanding and reasonable. It took him by surprise and filled him with a faint sense of guilt. People are always insatiable. When they stand on one shore, their eyes are always fixed on the scenery across the river. After making his vow, Meng Tingju left in a hurry, the moment the door closed behind him. Zhonga and I immediately dropped the masks we had been wearing for so long. Mother, was he telling the truth just now? I shook my head. I don't know, but I can tell you a story. He looked at me, his eyes full of curiosity. What story? Before I divorced your father, he said the exact same thing to me. He told me that even if he married Li Shina, I would still be his wife, and he would never treat me unfairly in any way. But look at us now. Li Shina has been so aggressive, smearing our names and trying to drive us out of the capital. Your father knows the truth, but he refuses to clear our names, not even punishing her in the slightest. So now, do you still believe his words, that you are just as precious to him as his other child? Zhonga shook his head firmly. Then he walked over to the table, spread out a book, and sat up straight, looking like a little adult. Mother, I understand. We must take our fate into our own hands. We can never rely on anyone but ourselves. Even if we never go back to the Marquis's mansion, I can study hard and pass the imperial examinations. I will make a name for myself and give you a bright future. I stroked his head and smiled. My good boy. 8. After that, Meng Tingju came to visit Shueyun Courtyard every now and then, just to sit and chat. It wasn't that he cherished our past love so much, it was that life in the Marquis's mansion had become utterly suffocating for him. Li Shina, emboldened by her pregnancy, had become more and more arrogant and unreasonable, and Meng Tingju, afraid of upsetting her, dared not say a single word against her, letting her vent her anger on him however she pleased. Every time he came to see us, faint scratch marks could be seen on his neck. To cover them up, he had to wear high-collared robes even in the scorching heat of the dog days of summer. I, on the other hand, was always understanding and gentle, helping him apply ointment to his wounds. If it's too hard for you, my lord, you don't have to come to see Zhonga. We understand. He grabbed my hand tightly. How could it be hard? Tell me, are you suffering any grievances living here? If there is anything you are lacking these days, just tell me, and I will get it for you at once. I pulled my hand out of his grasp, subtly but firmly. If you really want to help me, I would like to have your jade pendant, although I was not short of money. My social status was low. In a place like the capital, where power and influence meant everything, I always ran into obstacles whenever I tried to get things done. But with a token from the Marquis's mansion in my possession, things would become much easier, whether I was taking Zhonga to visit the great scholars of the capital, or hiring private investigators to look into the suspicious things Li Shina had been up to behind the scenes. Half a year later, Li Shina gave birth to a baby boy, whom they named Meng Ruyu. The entire Marquis's mansion was filled with joy and celebration, with lanterns and colored streamers decorating every corner of the estate. Meng Tingju said that he would finally put the plan to bring Zhonga back to the mansion into action, preferably before the baby's 1-month-old banquet, so that they could celebrate both occasions together. Li Shina flew into a rage as soon as she heard the news. This is a matter of the Marquis's mansion's reputation. I will never agree to you recognizing this child of unknown origin as your heir, my lord. What you don't know is that I have already sent people to thoroughly investigate her background. She had gathered all sorts of evidence, making a huge fuss about it, vowing to make Meng Tingju see my true colors once and for all. I couldn't help but sigh to myself. She really was full of energy. She had only just given birth a little over a month ago. Yet she still had the strength to stir up so much trouble. In the main hall of the Marquis's mansion, Li Shina sat on the seat of honor, her tone sharp and accusing, like a magistrate interrogating a prisoner. I sent my men to question your neighbors in Lingju. They all said that although you divorced the Marquis 11 years ago, you didn't return to Lingju until 9 years ago, by which time you had already given birth to the child. No one can testify to exactly when he was born. As far as I know, the journey from the capital to Lingju takes no more than 3 or 4 months. Who knows what you were doing during that missing year and a half? I recalled the events of that year, then spoke up calmly, explaining everything in detail. I didn't find out I was pregnant until the 3rd day after we divorced. When I was already on my way out of the capital, the carriage ride was bumpy, and I was suffering from severe morning sickness, so I had to travel very slowly. Then, halfway through the journey, we encountered a massive flood in the south. Thousands of refugees were fleeing north to escape the disaster. I was carrying a large sum of money with me, and I was dressed in fine clothes. I also looked like a weak woman who couldn't even lift a chicken. To protect myself, I had no choice but to stop in Yaroju to wait for the danger to pass. By the time it was safe to travel again, my pregnancy was already advanced. So I simply stayed in Yaroju to give birth to the child. I rested there for more than half a year before finally making my way back to Lingju. The old Madame Meng's eyes flickered slightly. Her eldest son had contracted a severe lung disease 10 years ago, while he was on an imperial mission to help with flood relief efforts, and had been gravely ill ever since. Meng Tingju quickly stepped in to smooth things over. All right, Shina, at the end of the day, the fault lies with our Marquis's mansion. If I had sent a few guards to escort her back then, none of these disputes would have happened today. Besides, just look at this child, he looks exactly like me, as if he were carved from the same mold. How could he possibly be someone else's son? You can't be so sure. She had a second ace up her sleeve, and she was ready to play it. There are so many people who look alike in this world. Finding another man who resembles you would be child's play. Bring the adulterer up here at once. She clapped her hands 3 times. The servants quickly dragged a strange man into the hall. His name was Xiao Ku, and he was a wandering knight-errant. He voluntarily confessed that he had once had a brief affair with me and that he was Zhong's biological father. He described their illicit relationship in vivid, salacious detail. Madame was traveling alone when one evening, as the sky grew dark, some bandits saw that she was only accompanied by a maidservant, defenseless and vulnerable. They tried to assault her. Fortunately, I happened to pass by and saved her from danger. To thank me, she invited me to a restaurant for a drink. It was that night. Madame had too much to drink, and she mistook me for the Marquis of Yongning. That was how we ended up having a night of passion, and that was how this child was conceived. He looked up, and to everyone's shock, his facial features bore an uncanny resemblance to Meng Tingzhou's. Xiao Ku turned to look at me, his voice filled with righteous indignation. Madam, I thought it was just a moment of drunken confusion on your part, but I never dreamed that you would give birth to my child. I never dreamed that you would bring him to the capital and try to pass him off as the Marquis's son, all just to climb the social ladder and enjoy the wealth and glory of the Marquis's mansion. I frowned deeply and took a step back, looking shocked and appalled. You're spouting nonsense. I have never laid eyes on you in my entire life. His voice rose a notch, loud and clear, echoing through the hall. Jiang Jiue, can you say that with a clear conscience, if we were truly strangers? How could I possibly know that you have a plum blossom-shaped birthmark on your waist? I let out a gasp of horror, my face turning pale. You're lying. Crash. Meng Tingzhu lost control of his emotions, slamming his teacup down so hard that it shattered into 100 pieces. For such an intimate, private detail to come out of a stranger's mouth, who could possibly believe that I was innocent now? The hall was on the verge of descending into chaos, when the old Madame Meng slammed her walking stick on the ground, her voice ringing out sharply, silencing everyone. Enough, all of you. "Shut up at once. What good will all this shouting and arguing do? It will solve nothing." The entire hall fell completely silent, everyone cowed by her authority. "There's no need for all this trouble. We can simply do a blood test to prove paternity, whether she is innocent, or whether she is trying to pass off a child of unknown origin as the Marquis's heir. We will have our answer once and for all. Send word to all the elders of the Meng clan. In 7 days' time, I want all of them to come to the Marquis's mansion to witness the test for themselves." To prevent me from tampering with anything, old Madame Meng took Zhonga away from me for these 7 days, keeping him under close watch alone. He had never left my side since birth. Though my heart ached with reluctance now, there was nothing I could do. 7 days later, in the main hall of the Marquis's mansion, everyone gathered together. For the sake of the Marquis's family reputation, old Madame Meng did not let Zhonga appear in public. Instead, she kept him in the back room, personally supervising as a small bowl of his blood was drawn. All these items today were prepared under my supervision. This matter concerns the bloodline of the Marquis's mansion. I will never show favoritism to anyone. Since none of you have any objections, let us begin. A servant dripped the blood into a bowl of clear water, then handed a silver needle to Xiao Ku. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiao Ku pricked his finger. Everyone held their breath, staring intently at the result. The blood fused together. "What?" Meng Tingju stepped forward in utter disbelief. Over these past few months, he had already accepted Zhonga as his own flesh and blood. Now, confronted with such a result, he found it impossible to take in. He fetched another identical bowl of blood water, pricked his own finger, and dripped his blood into it. No fusion. He called for a doctor to come forward. "Is there something wrong with this water?" After carefully examining it, the doctor shook his head. "No, your lordship. Could there be some other trickery involved?" The doctor replied with trepidation. "Your lordship, I have checked everything thoroughly. The water, the bowl, the silver needle, all are perfectly clean, with no signs of tampering. You must accept this fact. This child is truly not your blood relative." In front of everyone, Meng Tingju could no longer deceive himself. His brows furrowed deeply, and the veins on his forehead stood out in anger. His eyes fixed on me, filled with nothing but profound disappointment. "Jiang Zhiyue, I trusted you so wholeheartedly, yet you dared to lie to me like this." A deafening roar seemed to explode in my ears. My heart thundered violently, as if it were about to leap out of my chest. I shook my head frantically, my expression a picture of panic. This can't be possible. How can it be? Zhonga is the child I carried for 10 months and gave birth to. I know him better than anyone else. How could he not be the Marquis's own flesh and blood? Why? Li Shina raised an eyebrow, a cold smile playing on her lips. All these pieces of evidence were prepared under the personal supervision of the old lady. She has always been impartial and selfless. Do you mean to imply that the old lady deliberately fabricated evidence to frame you? Or are you simply refusing to accept this irrefutable proof? The blood in my veins turned cold in an instant. I shook my head, stumbling back a step, my legs giving way beneath me as I nearly collapsed to the ground. Regarding the identity of this child, I truly have no way to refute this. All the elders here have witnessed it for themselves, in the full view of everyone. The evidence is conclusive. What else do you have to say for yourself? She laughed wildly, tears almost spilling from her eyes. What so-called legitimate son lost to the outside world? He is clearly nothing but a bastard, a mongrel. Jiang Zhiyue lusted after wealth and status, so she risked everything to confuse the Marquis's bloodline. A shameless woman like her deserves nothing less than to be dragged away and drowned in a pig cage. Someone, come at once. Drag this vile woman away to meet her fate. Bang! The main door was thrown open, in an instant. Bright sunlight streamed in, dazzling everyone's eyes until they stung. But the ones who entered were not the mansion guards sent to arrest me. They were the servants of the Marquis's mansion. A wet nurse held a newborn baby in her arms, while another servant led Jonga forward. Grandmother, father, mother. He stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Meng Tingzhou's expression was complicated, and he did not know what to say. I knelt down halfway, pulling him into my arms, and asked softly how he had eaten and slept these past few days, whether he had been frightened. He shook his head. Grandmother treated me very well. I smiled with relief. My good boy, you have been wronged. Then I led him forward, standing before everyone. Everyone, look closely. Jonga spread his hands open, displaying them carefully. All 10 of his fingers were intact, unharmed. As for the baby in the swaddle, the pad of his index finger had been pricked by a needle, and blood was still oozing from the wound. Li Shina finally realized that something was terribly wrong. Her eyes widened with rage, and she glared at me fiercely. Look here. I nodded toward the bowl of water on the table. My tone was calm and nonchalant, as if discussing something trivial. The blood we tested just now, it was your child's blood, and you have admitted it with your own mouth. The reversal came so suddenly that the huge hall fell into a deathly silence. Jiang Zhiyue. Her voice cracked with fury. You tricked me. You set me up. Yes, I nodded calmly, without any trace of guilt. If you truly had a clear conscience, what harm would a little trick like this have done to you? Before the blood test, I had sought an audience with old Madame Meng. She had a habit every month on the 15th day. Without fail, she would go to the small Buddhist hall to chant scriptures and pray for blessings. I catered to her preferences, copying Buddhist scriptures 100 times in advance, until I finally earned her summons. Inside the small Buddhist hall, incense curled gently into the air, filling the room with a faint, serene fragrance. I could not expose the truth that Meng Tingzhou was infertile, so I had to hint at it in a subtle, roundabout way. I have always walked the straight and narrow, with a clear conscience. Naturally, I have nothing to fear from any kind of investigation, but I am afraid that Li Shina, in order to ensure that her own child can inherit the title of heir apparent in the future, will resort to underhanded means during the blood test to prevent Jonga from being recognized as your son and returning to the mansion. Old Madame Meng was persuaded by my words, and finally nodded her head in agreement. Doubts had already lingered in her heart for a long time. 10 years. This child had not come earlier, nor later. He had been conceived precisely at the time when I had just returned to the capital. If it was a coincidence, it was far too much of a coincidence for anyone to believe. The spies I had bribed earlier had uncovered the truth. Li Shina and Xiao Ku were old acquaintances. Years ago, she had accompanied her father into exile after he was demoted from his official post, moving to Linen. During that time, their family had suffered countless snubs and humiliations, and had even been ambushed and targeted by political enemies along the way. It was Xiao Ku who had come to their aid, taking pity on their plight. They had met in their time of adversity, and had developed mutual affection for each other. He was a free-spirited wandering swordsman, while she was a fallen noble lady in distress. Day after day, their bond had deepened, and love had gradually blossomed between them. Later, when she returned to the capital and married into the Marquis's mansion, the two of them had continued their secret trysts in private. In pursuit of excitement, she would sometimes dress Xiao Ku in Meng Tingzhou's clothes, hiding him inside the mansion. They would meet secretly at night, and she would sneak him out before dawn broke. After all, the two men were of similar height and appearance. Even if a servant occasionally caught a glimpse of a vague figure, they would never have suspected anything amiss. After I returned to the capital, Li Shina had feared that her position would be threatened. In her desperation, she had turned to Xiao Ku, who bore a striking resemblance to Meng Tingzhou, and begged him to father a child with her. Xiao Ku had adored her for many years, and was naturally willing to obey her every command, helping her to fabricate false evidence and frame me for her crimes. After I left the Marquis's mansion all those years ago, many of the servants who had once waited on me had been transferred to Li Shina's service. It would have been no difficulty at all for her to find out about the birthmark on my body. Xiao Ku realized that the situation had taken a turn for the worse, and that he was trapped. He tried to use his lightness kung fu to escape with Li Shina, but as early as the night before, Xiao Tang had secretly added muscle-relaxing powder to his meal. Now, he was completely powerless to resist, forced to watch helplessly as the mansion servants restrained him, tying him up tightly with ropes. A servant entered the hall, carrying a tray with a single flower placed upon it. The petals were a deep, vivid red, brilliant and striking in color. In the southern border, there is a flower known as the red peony root. It contains a mild toxin. When ingested, it temporarily alters the activity of one's blood, causing it to fuse with the blood of any other person. As I explained, I collected 3 bowls of blood from Xiao Ku's wound, handing them to Meng Tingju and Xiao Tang respectively, keeping the last bowl for myself. An absurd and shocking scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. The blood of the 3 of us, Meng Tingju, Xiao Tang, and me, when mixed with Xiao Ku's blood, without exception, all of it fused together perfectly. I then asked the doctor to perform the blood test once more, this time using the blood of Meng Tingju and Zhonga. Meng Tingju stared fixedly at the result in the bowl, before finally speaking up with great difficulty, his voice heavy with emotion. He looked at Zhonga and said, I was wrong about you earlier, my son. Zhonga turned away from him, hiding behind me, refusing to acknowledge his apology. He had endured so much grievance and injustice these past few days. Now, he had finally been proven innocent, his true identity restored. Everyone else had doubted him, but I had always believed in him. I turned to look at Li Shina, a bright, triumphant smile spreading across my face. You went to such elaborate lengths to stage this entire farce today. Your only goal was to ruin the reputation of our mother and son, to prevent my son from being recognized by the Marquis as his own. That way, your bastard child with Xiao Ku could pass himself off as legitimate, inheriting everything that belongs to the Marquis in the future. But in the end, all your elaborate schemes have failed. You have outsmarted yourself, and your every trick has backfired. Meng Tingzhou's eyes were bloodshot with rage as he stared at her, his gaze burning with betrayal. He asked her, each word dripping with pain and anger, when we married, I promised you a phoenix crown and a red silk robe, a wedding procession stretching for 10 miles, marrying you with all the splendor and glory a woman could dream of. For these past 10 years, I have treated you with nothing but kindness and respect. Why did you betray me like this? Now that her scheme had been exposed, she no longer bothered to maintain her pretense of innocence. Meng Tingju, you heartless, hypocritical wretch. Do you remember how my family suffered when my father was demoted and exiled to Linen? How we were humiliated and looked down upon by everyone?
Been secretly prepared by Xiao Tang. It had been done with extreme secrecy, leaving no trace behind, and it had all happened so long ago. Thus, when the investigation into Meng Tingzhou's infertility finally came full circle, the blame ultimately fell on his concubine. 12. The truth came to light at last. Meng Tingzhou had never imagined that he would be betrayed and plotted against by the 2 women he loved the most. The blow was so devastating that he was struck down by a severe illness. Overcome with anger and heartbreak, he was force-fed bowl after bowl of bitter medicinal decoctions, but his condition never improved. Xiao Tang felt his pulse, then quietly dug up a packet of discarded medicinal dregs from beneath a tree in Li Shina's courtyard. It was then that they discovered the horrifying truth. From the moment Li Shina had found out the gender of the child in her womb, she had been secretly poisoning Meng Tingzhou's food and drink. Small doses, administered repeatedly over a long period of time. That was why, in the days leading up to his illness, he had seemed perfectly healthy on the surface. While his insides had long been ravaged beyond repair, the damage too severe to reverse. During the days when he was confined to his bed to recuperate, He spent more time with me than anyone else. I plucked the strings of the qin, just as I had done all those years ago at the minister's mansion, playing for him, chatting with him about musical scores and the subtleties of melody. Jiue, play another tune for me, please. Ever since I fell ill, I've been feeling so miserable, weak all over. Dizzy, my ears ringing constantly. He reclined lazily on a small couch, propped up on thick goose-down cushions, his face haggard and pale, only his eyes still held a faint glimmer of light. But whenever I listen to you play the qin, I feel so much better. I smiled softly. I spoke to him in a gentle, soothing voice, coaxing him like a child. Then I'll play *Moonlit River in Spring * for you once more. He was completely enchanted by the music. The furrow between his brows gradually smoothed out, and before long, his breathing became steady, and even as he drifted off to sleep, it wasn't that my qin playing possessed some miraculous healing power, it was simply that he was dying. The sachet I wore at my waist contained a herb called wulan grass, harmless to ordinary people, but when it interacted with the poison Li Shina had given him, it triggered a fatal reaction, clashing violently with the toxic substances in his body. Though it could numb the pain temporarily, it unknowingly accelerated the deterioration of his failing health. Perhaps it was because death was drawing near. These days, he would always hold my hand, rambling on about the old days, talking about trivial, scattered memories. Jiue, he squeezed my hand weakly. Looking back on my life, I have truly loved so many people, but all of them either plotted against me or betrayed me, from beginning to end. You were the only one who ever treated me with genuine sincerity, and you are the one I have wronged the most. I lowered my eyes, tucking the quilt around him gently, comforting him softly. Rest well and focus on getting better. There's still a long way to go. The secret of the infertility medicine I had given him all those years ago, I planned to take it to my grave. Who could have imagined that his concubine would later give him the exact same drug? Somehow, someone else had ended up taking the blame for my crime. Why should I not take advantage of this stroke of luck? One day, as I was carrying my qin on my way to Meng Tingzhou's courtyard, I ran into Zhong'e, who had just finished his lessons. He was on his way to the study. I called him over, stopping him in his tracks. Come with mother to visit your father. Stay a while and talk to him more. He hesitated, then frowned, looking reproachful. Mother, when did you become like this? I explained to him patiently. You are the heir apparent now. One day, you will inherit everything he has. It won't do for people to see that father and son are estranged from each other. He thought about it for a moment, then nodded, agreeing that I was right. Under my prompting, Zhong'e began to visit his father more and more frequently. Father and son started having long, frequent conversations. They would chat about trivial things, what he had eaten that day, what he had learned in his studies, how he was getting along with his cousins. Zhong'e was sharp-witted and had an excellent memory, able to grasp new knowledge quickly and make connections between different subjects with ease. Now, with the status of the Marquis's heir, with the greatest scholars of the time teaching him, and with countless rare and precious books at his disposal, he made rapid progress in his studies, as expected. Moreover, he had inherited the musical talent that ran in both my and his father's blood. After listening to me play the qin for so long, he had taught himself to play without any formal instruction. Meng Tingzhou doted on him deeply. He truly is our son, no doubt about it. One evening, Meng Tingzhou's condition took a sudden and drastic turn for the worse. Almost everyone in the mansion gathered around his bed, waiting for the final farewell. He saw so many people, spoke so many words, and finally, he sent for Zhong'e and me. Meng Tingzhou reached out, taking both of our hands in his. His eyes filled with unspeakable grief and reluctance. His voice was broken and fragmented, his breath growing weaker by the second, barely able to form coherent sentences. When I die, leave everything to you and the child. From now on, no one in the capital will ever dare to bully you and our son again. As soon as the words left his lips, his hand fell limply to his side. His eyes closed slowly, and a single tear slid down his cheek. The old Madame Meng stumbled forward, trembling, reaching out to check his breath. She let out a heart-wrenching wail of sorrow. My son, my poor son. In an instant, the room was filled with the sound of weeping, everyone overcome with grief. I hugged Jonga tightly, crying bitterly as well, though perhaps it was tears of joy, not sorrow. After Meng Tingzhou's death, my son Meng Ruzhang inherited the title of Marquis of Yongning. In the decades that followed, he passed the imperial examinations with flying colors, embarked on a successful official career, rose to the position of Grand Secretary, and enjoyed an unobstructed path to the highest ranks of power. To prevent my name from being forever tied to Meng Tingzhou's, he submitted a memorial to the emperor, requesting a noble title for me in my own right. From then on, I remained in the Marquis's mansion as the biological mother of the Marquis of Yongning. Spending my remaining years in peace and comfort, well provided for, I held the imperial edict, its bright yellow silk glimmering in the light, and stroked my son's head gently, just as I had done when he was a little boy. I said softly, with a proud smile, "My son, you've done so well."